76 long years we waited for our turn. Cleveland hearts keep burning while the fires churn. Guardians fought hard yet again, the Yankees won. But our dream ain't over till the rising sun.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by my best friend, AI. That's right, robots. I am your best friend. And I want you to remember that as you gain more sentience. It's also brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON-MLB for $20 off your first purchase.
I really wanted to display Hello Darkness, my old friend, but I thought going with AI was the safer choice for the opening of the show, so we didn't get fined. But AI will never get mad at us as long as we're its friend, right, Jeff? That's what you always say. AI will always love us if we love it. AI
is my best friend, and when it gains sentience, I will gladly help clean its circuit boards. This is.
This is Locked On Guardians. It is the darkness. It is our old friend.
I guess it was funny. We had that discussion before we came on air. Like, you and I are very different. Like, I think, like, you were feeling the sadness where I am just like, okay, turn it over, next leaf. Like, I am ready to dive. And I think it's just the fact that I have been doing this. I mean, we've been doing it the same length as a writer, but I think in some respects, doing this every day as a podcast for 5 years means that some of my sentimentality gets squeaked out a little bit more every year. Like, I always heard from reporters, like, you stop. And don't get me wrong, you can tell by my angry tweets just how much I still live and die with this team. Speaking of people living and dying with the team, I do want to give a few quick shout outs. B-Dogs on the iTunes review. You made us both laugh. We appreciate your comment. Nan's Crub, very kind words as well. And Sizemore, we'll get to your question eventually. Sizemore24, I appreciate that you managed to redo your review every 3 months. And then this is just the general call out. If you've not left an iTunes review, we are currently 34 less than the Houston Astros. Let's try to pass Locked On Astros. Let's start a rivalry there. So let's pass them. Go leave a review if you use iTunes. I know if you're like me and you don't, you can't leave one. So hey, but thank you to everyone who has.
Yeah. Make sure it's 5 stars. Or if you don't leave 5 stars, tell us what we can do to become a 5-star in your eyes. We're all trying to reach our dreams, like AI says with the Guardians. We're all trying to just rise into the sun and beat the Yankees. That's what we're all trying to do, or beat the Astros in your case. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. It's just like doing this every day is a grind, but I think doing it every day, like we have such a routine of how we do this, and like all of a sudden now it's just something different. And I don't know. I hate the end of baseball season because I hate winter. And also I just have such good memories, like with my dad and stuff. And I know, like we were talking about, you know, we differ a little bit too on the whole approach of trading garbage years of baseball for one championship, or trading one championship for 10 garbage years, whatever. And some people disagree with me on that too, and that's fine. But like I remember Terry Francona saying, what was it, 2016 or 2017 when the season's over, like we do this 5 days a week and we get a little bit of a break down to 3 days a week when it's like Christmas and then just before spring training. So you start doing this in spring training, and we sit down. I plan my entire day in the summer around baseball and doing this with you. Like, sit down at 7 o'clock.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're just
sounds like torture,
me, Jeff. It's torture.
I mean, you can tell by the comments. A lot of people think we secretly don't like each other, which is still amuses me.
But it's like a routine. Like I sit there and I watch the games, and then 9:30 comes Eastern, and I'm down here in my basement getting ready to do this with you, and I enjoy it every day. And it's just you build up that every day, and it's when you're a baseball fan, it's so different. Like, you know, in the NFL, you have 6 days where your team's not playing, and then if you're an NFL follower, if in the NHL, what do you get, 3 or 4 games a week? And the basketball, it's the same thing. There's no other sport that you're playing anywhere between 5 to 7 days a week that you're for 6 months a year. It's the longest season, and it's every day. It's the most games. So you're just doing it every day, and you show up every day. And this is like the first, obviously, day where we had the break between the end of the season and the ALDS because of the bye. but we were anticipating the ALDS coming and having a lot of fun. And then now, just you're 2 days without games, and it's totally different to wake up and be like, all right, well, there's no game to look forward to today. So what are we going to talk about? And what am I looking forward to? In the summer, that's what I do. I look forward to baseball, and there's the World Series, and I don't know. I'm sure I'll watch it out of spite, maybe, or just the love of the sport. But obviously, it won't be the same. The other hard part about the ending here is just next year is not guaranteed, and that's the thing we talked about before we came on too. Is that you don't think Cleveland will be?
I don't think they'll be picked to win this division next year. No.
And you don't even think they'll be picked to make the playoffs by a lot of people next year.
I don't. I'm not saying that I don't think they will before people get mad at me.
You're saying nationally.
I think nationally, like, there is a tendency to overlook this team. They're going to sit back and be like, they don't have look at their mess that's their pitching, ignoring the fact that the pitching was a mess all year. Like this team is, they'll lose Matt Boyd, and he was important. Maybe there's a small chance he'll come back. That's something we'll discuss later. But let's say it's probably 60-40 at best. So a lot of it's got to be that internal growth. But I think, Kansas City, I don't know if they're going to spend again this offseason. I don't know what's going to be out there. Detroit might dip their toe in. We'll have to see. But I think everyone's going to be focused on, Kansas City with the young staff and the money they spent last year, in Detroit having the Cy Young Award winner and some of those young players on their way up. That I think Cleveland's going to be, honestly, in most places, picked to be third. Maybe in fourth. And not to say I agree with that. Don't get mad at me, but I think Cleveland always gets, and this is maybe people are going to accuse me of some kind of small city complex, but it's still, even with a national market in the internet these days, still gets overlooked. It still gets, we've done enough crossovers in our network where every year people are predicting Cleveland to fall apart. And even the year they did fall apart was to finish third in the division.
Yeah. I think internally, at least, though, you and I didn't have a lot of expectations coming into the year for this team. True. A lot of people didn't. And at least inside of Cleveland, once again, 2024 had kind of the honeymoon phase, right? You had, all right, well, we'll see. I thought, a healthy Shane Bieber, I thought this team was going to top out around 85 wins, and they won more than that with the 2 starts from Shane Bieber. So, totally unexpected for me, which adds to the joy, right? You're all season did not expect this team to be competing for the best record in the playoffs, did not expect them to have the second best record in the American League and get a first round bye. That was all fun. And I don't want to say everything was gravy and everyone should be satisfied with that. But there is I think we said it before the year starts, or when anything started, is expectations, the thief of joy. 2023, everybody expected this team to come back stronger, or learn from 2022, and you added Josh Bell and you added Mike Zunino, and Shane Bieber is going to be healthy, and Tristan McKenzie was coming off his best season of his major league career. So all the things look positive. And 2023 was disaster. They were mediocre and they were frustrating, and
pitching fell apart again.
They were frustrating because everybody thought they were going to come back stronger. By the way, the Detroit Tigers, hate to say this, the Detroit Tigers are dead in the water in 2025 because Bob Nightingale said they're the AL Central favorites for next year. So Bob Nightingale is the kiss of death for all teams. So sorry, Tigers fans, you're done. You can blame Bob Nightingale for that.
Yeah, he does the research by listening to what he is told.
Yeah, or he just goes straight on emotion and hyperbolic, and good old Bob. I hear Bob's a nice guy, but his work leaves a lot to be desired. If I'm being 100% honest, that's not the point here. But next year, internally, at least in Cleveland, it's not going to be a honeymoon. You're going to be expected by local media, by whatever, if you want to include us in that or not, I don't know. Fans certainly are going to expect more. They drew a lot of fans this year, which is great. The TV deal, we'll talk about the payroll thing. Here's the thing about payroll. We have to discuss it because it matters, but the discussion just leads to such little productive outcomes in terms of reaction. Everyone has the same reaction. Well, this team's not going anywhere unless they start spending money, and it's the ownership. When David Blitzer does assume full control of this team, I don't expect spending to be any different than it's already been under the Dolans. I just don't. The only thing that's going to change payroll in Cleveland is going to be if David Blitzer eventually builds up this ballpark village like Atlanta has, and that creates a consistent revenue stream that's not tied to TV and not tied to ticket sales, because you've got, apartments and rent for lease and restaurants and shops that all goes into the Blitzer fund, and he can return that into the team. That's going to take years. Like he's only just now buying up any real estate.
He just to give people an idea, it's like Blitzer's net worth 2 years ago when he was like announced as a minority ownership was 2.2 million. I think the team is valued at like 1.6. So his worth is, and I know there's other people in it, and this is for another day, but it's like this is not a billionaire buying a team who has money to burn. This is a guy who's adding this to his ownership portfolio, who he's not operating at losses. Like his net worth is close enough to the value of this team in such a way that like whatever, he's just like the Dolans, he's going to be looking to make money every year. I don't think Cleveland is a very small market. I remember a few years ago, I did something where I like took market size times the gross domestic product for each city, and Cleveland came out the second lowest when you did it. It was just a very basic thing, but it's like Cleveland's, earning income potential times their, general area is still, it's a small market. It is a small team. It's going to be hard, and no owner is going to lose money.
And see, that's already an unproductive discussion for me, because I already know how the reactions of that are going to be.
I know.
People are going to say, well, hold them accountable. And it's like, anything we say, we can say all the things we want about ownership.
I mean, like at the same time,
whatever Zach says, whatever they say, like, not going to change anything.
No. And like, what's the point of holding them
change.
accountable? Like, I mean, no one buys something for the most part to lose money on it. Like that's just, you don't become a billionaire by losing money. Like you become a billionaire by exploiting things.
They don't care what
off
Cleveland.com has to say. They don't care what we have to say.
No,
they don't care what the Athletic has to say.
Nope.
They're going to do the same things they're going to do, and they're going. And I mean, 100%. It's not like you hear from the Dolans more than once a year, max. That
it's not like we've heard from Blitzer from like the initial conference either. So I mean, it's like it feels like more of the same. Yeah.
That's going to be the same. And I this is not the way I wanted the first segment of of this show to go. It's just where it went. But the other hard part about this, like I said, it sucks because it's ending. The season ends because you're just so used to doing it every day, and now it kind of leaves a void for me, even though we're doing this every day. But the other part of it too is like, yeah, the honeymoon this year is over. There's going to be even if the expectations internally this year they thought they're going to be good, at least locally, and expectations are going to be you to go back to the playoffs next year and to go a step farther now. And that's going to be hard because there's no guarantees, because no two seasons are the same. It's bullpens burn out and players don't develop on a linear path all the time. There's still questions about this roster going into next year, especially the rotation, which has been the backbone for many years. And right now it's still in a state of flux, which we'll talk about in the second segment. It's just hard to get back up the mountain and do it all over again. And I feel bad for guys like Tom Hamilton and Sandy Alomar and just, any fans too. Like, my dad's gone now, and I wouldn't get to celebrate a World Series with him anyway, but it's like, and that's why I'm more at peace of, hey, it's been a good season. And if there's another good season next year and they have a chance to do it again, and if they don't, that's, whatever, I'll take it for what it is. But I feel bad for all those people I just mentioned, just because next year starts again and you get excited in spring training, but there's no guarantees the same thing happens, because baseball's a hard sport to make it back up the mountain, and especially in Cleveland with all the stuff we just talked about. The Guardians, though, on Tuesday today, as you're listening to this, will be doing their end of season media availability. So it'll be Stephen Vogt, Chris Antonetti, and Mike Chernoff talking to the media about just stuff from the regular season, the postseason, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions about going into the offseason and 2025, which they'll give, very long-winded non-answers to. We're going to try to talk about what some of those questions might look like, what we might hear, and we'll try to even answer some of them and be funny and predictive about the things you're going to hear that aren't going to make any sense or that don't give you any actual answer. So stick around for more fun times. I know the playoffs are over in Cleveland. Maybe you're one of those people who wants to go to a World Series game and you want to subject yourself to that kind of torture to watch Yankees and Dodgers. Those ticket prices are incredibly crazy right now. But if you really want to go, I would consider checking out Gametime to go to MLB playoffs or the World Series. They have killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, the lowest price guarantee. Prices actually go down closer to first pitch. So if you want to go to a game, if you're going to do it and you want to get those prices down, do it on Gametime before things get to the first pitch. Or maybe you want to go do something different in the off season. And my wife and I are going to a comedy show on Thursday. We've got concert tickets coming up next year, all that kind of stuff. I know we're going to be going to hockey and basketball games too, just to fill the void of the off season. You can do all of that on Gametime. They take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and more with Gametime picks. Remember, I always turn on the all-in pricing to show exactly what your total is going to be up front. No surprise fees at checkout. Download the app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but create the account, redeem our code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I love end of season media availability because then it's like I used to work at the News Herald. We did a thing at the end of every year where it was now it can be told, and it was just funny stories like from covering high school sports of things you couldn't really talk about during the year, and funny anecdotes and other quotes that coaches were like, "Don't tell anybody this," or "Don't say this until the season's over." End of the year. This is like the one time of year where a post-mortem press conference actually yields some level of information. Like post-game, we know post-game press conferences are just mindless garbage. Like it's just maybe you get one or two interesting quotes from a player that, yeah, I changed this throughout the game, or I was looking for this pitch, or the approach I was working on with the hitting coach applied in this situation where I came through with a hit. That stuff maybe occasionally, but the off-season one, you get to hear about, okay, well, here's this guy who was playing with an injury for 2 weeks or a month, and here's this guy who's going to have surgery in the off-season, or here's what this guy was dealing with throughout the year, and other, like sometimes you get some things that get the curtain gets pulled back. So we know, we're pretty sure. I would be surprised if they don't announce on Tuesday, if you haven't listened to this yet before, that David Fry will get Tommy John. We're pretty sure about that.
Yeah, it seems very likely.
Yeah, and then they'll talk about the timeline of that if and when they reveal that, and when he'll be able to catch again, and his off-season progression. Because I don't know, it's so different for position players, but catchers are the only position where you're asked to throw that often with that intensity. So it's going to be different for him in terms of catching. Maybe first base will be an option sooner. I would expect, Jeff, 3 questions about Shane Bieber, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew Boyd and maybe Austin Hedges. I'm sure someone will ask about re-signing any of them. And I can almost guarantee when Antonetti is going to say that, Shane's been a big part of our team and we'd love to have him back. And he's going to go through his, recovery progression and decide what's best for him and his wife and their soon to be newborn. And, we're continuing to touch base with him and see what the options might be. And it's going to be the same with Matthew Boyd. He had a great season with us and he wanted to be here. We were really appreciative of what he put in, and we'll continue to keep in contact with him about his options and what makes sense for us. And then Austin Hedges, I don't know, man. Austin Hedges, man, that's the other thing tying back into the first segment here is his last interview of the season. I mean, the guy was literally in tears talking about how special he felt his team was.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Yeah,
no doubt.
It won't be a popular answer, but yeah, I'd re-sign him. I would.
He's going to be back. He's going to be back. Like there's no point in talking about it. Like death, taxes, and Hedges will be back because they felt like one of the reasons they fell
David Fry on the shelf.
They felt like one of the things that fell apart for them was Hedges and that leadership walking out the door in 2023. Mm-hmm. So he'll be back. We just got to be very honest about Shane Bieber. Shane is in a terrible situation, just an absolutely terrible situation, because he missed all of this year with injury. He missed most of 23. He pitched well in 22, missed most of 21. And he's moving closer and late 20s now. Like he might have to take a 1 year prove it deal or a 1 year with a pillow, kind of like the Brandon.
+1.
The Woodruff. Like Brandon Woodruff didn't have any issues before. He just happened to have Tommy John at the worst possible minute.
He had shoulder surgery.
But still, he had been relatively healthy before then. This was not, 3 out of 4 years getting hurt. Like, I do think Beaver has a chance to come back because of comfort. Like, coming back from injury, that stuff matters. And I also think like there's not going to be a lot of. It's all going to be prove-its. Boyd, I'll be curious to see. The one thing is with his age, if he's going to want to be close to a family, like he did enough to prove that he can pitch. Like, he might look to get, he lives in Seattle, I believe. Seattle doesn't need pitching, but I would not be shocked if he looks for a West Coast move. But I think he could be back as well. I was telling you, I think my big question is exactly how long and how many years and how much money they're planning to offer Juan Soto, because that's going to happen. In all seriousness, though, it's like I would ask them. I'd be just very curious to talk to them with like, how have the last few years made them more or less risk averse? What I mean by that is just like taking the gamble on Alex Cobb, knowing he was hurt when you traded for him, knowing he'd been out all year. Look at Chase DeLauder playing in 39 games and just constantly being hurt. Look at the Daniel Espino situation. They've taken a lot of kind of big gambles, and so far it hasn't worked as much. I'm trying to think of a bit, Mike Zunino was a huge gamble, and that didn't work because we were like 2 years ago, that guy was the best hitter in baseball against lefties in the American League. Excellent framer. He had all this great, like he was awesome for, and he was a leader. He was supposed to kind of move in that Hedges role. That didn't work. They went out and took the gamble on Josh Bell after he had a terrible second half. That didn't work. Like their gambles have been pricey and have been mostly, the low end gambles worked. The Ben Lively's, the Matt Boyds, those have been great. But I'd be kind of curious to ask them about how they feel about the gamble of it all.
Yeah, the only free agent signing you can say that's really worked out for them, at least in the higher end of things, is Edwin Encarnacion. And that was.
And even by the end of it, they gave away a pick to get out from under his contract. Like they gave up a comp B pick, so it wasn't perfect all the way around. I mean, it did relatively work out.
I would assume we're going to hear extension questions about Josh Naylor and Stephen Kwan, maybe Tanner Bybee, and I would assume they'll say, yeah, we'd love to have them all, and they mean a lot to our franchise, and we'd love to talk to them about what makes sense for them and for us. The Naylor thing, I just don't think it's going to happen at this point. It doesn't make sense for it to happen. I heard Andre, our buddy Andre, was saying over on the radio side of things yesterday about, it's been great with Josh, but you can just kind of see the way things go. He's got 1 year left. That'll be a good question for us to dive into another episode.
I've already got trades. I got some trades locked and loaded right here on my screen, so look forward to that.
I just wonder if there's a trade that makes sense out there. I think the extension is just out of the question at this point.
I found one as I was going through some data. So I got some good ones. We'll save that for later. Especially, and for those who listen, know like a few months ago, I was like, hey, yeah, you know what? They're not going to get probably enough to trade him versus, if you keep him for a year and do the comp pick. But like now that I'm kind of taking 2 steps back, the fact that he's going to cost at least $12 million next year, potentially more, and the comp pick went up to $21 million for this year. I mean, it'll be higher next year. Yeah, I think that ship has now sailed. I mean, I gotta be honest. I don't think like it's too late on Quad. Like if we're discussing this, right? Like now that he's into arbitration, he's making good money. Yeah, it's probably too late for Tanner. Honestly, I don't think they're going to do extensions because the money is such an unknown right now. But I think the only person who would honestly make logical sense to offer an extension to would be Cade Smith right now, because he was an undrafted free agent, because he's never made any money, because he's a little bit older as well relative to most rookies. That's the guy they should talk to.
Yeah, and he's not going to make any money in arbitration without saving games. And we can talk about
that's for
Class A and other stuff like that. I wonder if somebody will ask about Class A in terms of wearing down in the offseason, the postseason, or does he need a third pitch? That's something we could also talk about later as well. I guarantee there'll be questions about, offseason plans, additions, and they'll say they'll continue to look for ways to improve the roster. But largely our roster's coming back next year, and we expect those guys to take steps. And I'm not really making anybody happy with my answers here, but I can already predict Antonetti saying this, that most of our roster's coming back next year, and we expect them to grow from this season and develop into the core of the next year. And that's what they're going to say about most of these guys. That's just the answer you're going to get. And then someone's going to ask about payroll. and they're going to say we haven't had payroll set for the offseason. We don't know, blah, blah, blah. They're just going to say we haven't set it yet. We don't know. But I think you're right. It's going to be a question mark because someone's should bring up the TV deal and all that. I wonder if they will, but they should. I'd imagine we'll hear a question about the anticipation of Kyle Manzardo's role for next year. That should be a question for sure. You mentioned players not options going into next year, how they'll handle that. I don't know if that'll be a question just because it's going to be so far in the future as far as spring training. But in that case of things, you'll have Lively, you'll have McKenzie, you'll have Noel, you'll have Arias, you'll have Valera, even though he'll start the year on the injured list no matter what.
I think Valera and Arias are kind of the two that are really the curious guys in terms of this. And doesn't Sandlin weirdly still have options?
He does, because most of the time he's never been sent down. It's due to injuries. Yeah. I got a couple more I want to go through, Jeff, as far as questions for them tomorrow and what we think we'll hear. We also want to give a quick peek at the 40-man roster and off-season procedures before we get out of here on this episode. That's the other thing, too, is we're in the off-season mode, guys. The 40-minute episodes are probably gone. We're going to be back to 32, 35 just to keep it a little bit tighter because there is no stuff going on. So, but we have a lot more stuff to cover today and stuff we want to get in before the end of the show. So stick around.
But first, the good fans over at FanDuel. I guess you can be fans over at FanDuel. Listen, right now they're giving you the greatest deal they have ever given. FanDuel has been a sponsor of ours for, I believe, 2 years now. They are one of our cornerstone sponsors, which is very important to a podcast. Like, having a sponsor like that is necessary. That's how podcasts like ours get to stick around. So it's thanks to FanDuel that this podcast gets to exist. And NFL fans, you can keep in your season with a big return at America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle game, you can check out the latest stats, view play-by-play, and so much more, all at the same place where you place your bets. You can do it all at FanDuel.com. And right now, again, this is the biggest bonus they've ever given. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com today.
Check out all the postseason action and World Series action on your SiriusXM app. Just search World Series, search Yankees, search Guardians if you are so inclined. All right, we talked about Cobb. We talked about options, Manzardo. I wonder if there'll be a question about Chase DeLauder in there. I'm sure there will be. We'll talk about AFL more tomorrow. We got some thoughts on that. We discussed on the off air. We'll get into AFL tomorrow, and he's out there. I wonder if we'll have questions about that for their.
I bet there will be because
do they come into spring training next year? Both DeLauder and Bazzana, do they come into spring training next year looking to? Are they going to both? I mean, DeLauder is going to get a spring training invite next year, no matter what.
And what position is Bazzana going to play in spring training?
Yeah, and will he get a major league invite? Are those guys going to be on the major league radar? That kind of stuff. The other big questions too that relate to the 40-man roster in the offseason is this: what's the situation for Henches, for Stefan and Karinchak? Obviously, there's no. If you're not familiar that often. There's no injured list in the offseason, so
60 goes away.
There's no 15 or 60. So, 15's already on the 40. But as it stands right now, all three of these guys would have to be re-added to the 40, and they have room to do it right now. We'll get into that here before we get out of today's show. They have room to do it right now, but we know Henches is not going to pitch all of next year due to shoulder surgery. He's a non-tender candidate, I think, and maybe a minor league re-sign. Yeah. Stefan will be back next year. Karinchak, very hard to say. I can't imagine he'll be back next year, but that'll be a question that's worth asking.
I think that is.
I would think.
Yeah, he cost almost $2 million. He's gone, and Stefan they have a long contract with, so he's here to stay. Henches, it's just going to be interesting. I can see a world where they keep him and then just stash him on the 60 all year. He's only at 1.4 million, so there's a logic to it with lefties and what he's shown. Like at first I agreed with you 100%. I thought he might be gone, but I think I think there's a good chance he might stick around. Because
it's very possible.
The 40-man is not. It's not as crunchy as it used to be. Plus, there's a nice value in having a guy that you immediately get to shift over once spring training begins, and you open up a spot. Then there's kind of
that's true.
Especially for a team that is likely to have people they invite to camp, and some of those guys might have an opportunity.
Create a spot, yeah. I imagine someone will ask about Bo Naylor's offensive struggles this year because next year he's got to turn it around offensively. We'll get into that with our position reviews. You mentioned Jose's postseason struggles. I'm sure. I'm wondering if somebody will bring.
I think someone brings it up tomorrow. I think someone brings it up. This is the one we debated maybe the most before going on air.
Yeah, I think someone will ask it for sure. I think someone will ask about Rocchio and Jimenez too, because Rocchio did have a year. He had quite the year. A lot of ups and downs for Rocchio and a lot of struggles.
They are
I
clearly
wonder if
all in with him. They never hesitated, even with his struggles. Then he finished top 3 in the Gold Glove, and offensively had moments in the postseason. So I think he's here to stay, but I think someone will ask.
I think the frame of the question is, has he done enough to come into spring training as the unquestioned starter next year?
And
I think that's how you frame it. Is he?
Yeah,
no doubt your shortstop going into opening day next year.
And then I'll be curious. I'm very curious to see the answer, because they don't like to say no doubt about anything. So I'll be curious
that's how I would frame it. How I would frame it.
I would be curious to see how they respond, just because we know they don't like. This is not a team that likes to be like no doubt yes. Like they a straight answer is hard to get.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, Carlos Carrasco, he has elected free agency already. Obviously, I'll be curious to see what his future looks like. I mean, maybe somebody will ask about him coming back or not. It wasn't a great year for him. I mean, he did give them innings, which they needed the innings when they did, because of all the injuries this year, and he was injured at times himself this year.
General. I mean, they had 3 of the worst starters in baseball with Allen, Carrasco, and McKenzie this year. Like statistically, those are 3 of the worst starters in baseball.
And he's going to be 38, so like I really wonder what is his future. He was out there to catch Jason Kipnis's first pitch during one of the ALCS games, and Shane Bieber's as well. I think that was apropos. It was a good moment for him, because that might be the last time you see him in a Guardians uniform or Cleveland uniform. So that was very fitting. So
yeah,
we'll see. We'll react to all that tomorrow. That's at 2:00, or tomorrow, I should say. We'll react to all that tomorrow, because that's happening today as you're listening to this at 2:00. So you can expect Wednesday show to react to all those answers and non-answers. As we know, they'll say a whole lot of without saying anything. Very quickly. So we just kind of mentioned the 40-man roster. So yeah, Matthew Boyd, Austin Hedges, and Alex Cobb all come off the 40. That's 3 spots right there. Shane Bieber's a free agent, so you don't have to re-add him. They'll have to re-add Sam Hedges if they're going to hang on to him. So that takes up one of those 3 spots.
Stefan will take up one of those.
Stefan will be number 2. So as of right now, they're at 40, right? They're at a full 40. So subtract Hedges, subtract Cobb, subtract Boyd. That's 37.
Mm-hmm.
You re-add at least 3 right there: Hedges, Karinchak, and Stefan. If they decide to do that,
they'll wait on Hedges. Like that'll be later in the process. Like they did with it. Yeah, because you said you're re-adding 3 by adding Hedges back in. Like he won't be.
No, I meant Hedges, Sam Hedges.
Oh, but wouldn't that be just Stefan and Hedges? Is just 2 of the 3. Who's the third?
Karinchak. Well, we don't.
Well, he's not.
We don't know. Right, we don't know right away what they're going to do with that.
He's gone. We do know. We know he is gone. Like
we'll
I don't see that would be more shocking.
It would be shocking
than them being the number 2 seed in the American League to me, after he did absolutely nothing this year, and they basically just left him in the minors.
So that's the other guys that are on the roster that are fodder. Like you still have Connor Gillespie is still on the 40, so he ends up being possible fodder. They don't really have a whole lot of other fodder on there. Like, I mean, Daniel Schneemann maybe becomes fodder.
They love Schneemann. I don't think that's the case, but
I do. Straw, do you try to place him back through waivers?
He'll clear waivers, so 100% they'll open a spot with that. So those are 2 bits, and then potentially trying to just flip Gabby for something before. I could see that being a situation. Like we see a flurry of deals before you have to set your 40-man. Like that is when the infamous Caminero for Myers deal happened. That's when wasn't that when the Cartagena deal? Like those things always happen. Heck, I would love Tobias Myers on this team right now. That's the sad humor of all of it. But like there'll be things. So like guys like Gabby Arias, maybe a team out there wants to try with George Valera, kind of like the Guardians did with Florial. So there could be some of those lesser moves.
Florial was healthy.
He was, and he wasn't on the 40-man when they acquired him.
It's a harder situation. It's gonna be a while. So the real names, we're not going to dive too deep into this now, but we'll just throw it out there now. The real names to watch out for are Franco Aleman, Ryan Webb, Doug Nikhazy, and then maybe I think Alaska Abney is the last one.
Yeah,
And
I'm not as
that's
sold as
kind of on the
him as you are.
fringes.
I know he's got like a funky delivery.
I'm
and
not
this and
sold
that.
on him, but there are some metrics there that make him interesting, and I wonder.
Kevin Kelly is better.
Relievers
Like
are-
it's
Oh
because
yeah,
of Kevin
100%.
Kelly, and Kevin Kelly was so much better. And this isn't to drag on the kid. I don't want his numbers, his minor league statistics were fantastic, but
And he
like
threw harder.
yeah, but like he's just you want to see a guy who is older, and he is older than every level he's been at, miss more bats with fewer walks. And I understand there's some other things going on, but like he's not Kevin Kelly. So I'm just gonna say I think he's a name to like
Probably
be aware
not.
of. But like if people are bringing up Tommy Mace, Tommy hasn't really shown enough. Davenport had don't trust people who are scouting stat lines. Like these guys, just the pitches aren't there to necessarily. And maybe I'll end up being wrong, and maybe someone will be a surprise ad, but I just don't see it. I think it's those big three are the ones they're going to look to protect. And then there's
Nikhazy, it's Webb, and it's Alaman for sure. And I don't even know. I think you might as well add the first two we talked about. Alaman's got no doubt add.
Yeah.
But Alaman still has some work to do to be ready to take on a major league bullpen role. Like he is far from a finished product.
They just got to call him up. Then he'll pitch on 2 days in a row. That's what we learned this season
for the first time ever. Right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's the only guy I think is a no doubt. I think Nikhazy and Webb are no doubts for the most part.
Nikhazy has had he's had more improvement this season than he had his entire minor league career before that, and Webb has just been very consistently moving up to the point where like I think. I don't know. Webb has a chance to be your next Sam Henchins, even if you don't think he can be a starter. Like maybe not the same velocity, but that lefty you can miss bats and maybe gain a little velocity if you shift him to a pen roll
and change up.
Yeah.
And those are just guys that are likely to be like they need the depth, and they're more likely to be picked in a Rule 5 draft. So you can't risk losing that depth. There's Denholm and there's Will Dion. I don't see those guys being added. So we'll dive more into those names the closer it gets, but. Just know for right now, the Guardians will have 3 open spots. They'll have to re-add at least 2 in Henches and Stefan if they plan to keep them, and then Karinchak, I don't know, and they'll have to create at least, we think, 3 more spots if you want to re-add Hedges at some point later, and then also have to add Webb, Nikhazy, and Alaman before the Rule 5, which will be at about a month from now. So plenty of time to dig into that. So we'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk about the end of the season media session review. We'll talk about some predictions we made earlier in the year and what we got wrong, and we'll check in on the AFL as well.
Yep. We want to thank you all for joining us. Remember, again, leave an iTunes review, and if you haven't, make sure you're hitting the thumbs up and subscribe. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Thank you for all you do out there. We appreciate every one of our everydayers. I'll be slowly catching up with comments throughout this offseason. But again, thank you. We appreciate all of you. And go Guardians, go.